Our No Flag, or Blue Flag in English, is genuinely one of the most emotionally complex and compelling manga I've read in a while. It deals with the intricacies of being a teenager, as well as discovering your sexuality and all the messy emotions that come with that. So if you want a recommendation, there it is. It's fantastic. Go read it.
Recently, we were up at like 3 AM watching random video essays as we do, and a video by Kamino popped up on our recommendation feed called Where's All the Bisexual Manga? And as a team of one bisexual and what are you? It was an eye-catching video, and hilarious. Another recommendation for sure, but stay here a little longer. We have a video too.
Out of all the manga he talked about, Blue Flag seemed pretty interesting. So I gave it a go. I was expecting a cute little story about a love triangle, and what I got was a deep dive into the complexities of romantic versus platonic relationships, and how that interacts with gender and identity. All through the lens of a bunch of teenagers, all at varying levels of comfort in their own skin. Now, for everyone else who's read it, or doesn't care about spoilers, let's talk about why it's so good. Many spoilers ahead.
Let's start with the protagonist Taichi Ichinose. He's shy and unpopular and incredibly jealous of his baseball star childhood friend Tomomita. This jealousy has been building all through middle and high school. He can't stand how much better everything Tome is compared to him, so the two have become distant in recent years. He's smart enough and studies hard, but has no idea what he wants to do in life other than go to university for something. He's our main POV character for most of the manga, and has a relatively neutral approach to life, which frustrates him. Our story really starts when Futaba Kuze, the shyest girl in the world and human hamster, asks Taichi to help her get closer to her crush, Toma. She developed feelings for him after they shared an intimate conversation about growing as a person and being more confident. She initially aspired to both date and be more like him, but eventually has to face that admiration and affection aren't one and the same. She finds herself more confident around Taichi, and the two of them decide to go out. Their time as a couple is full of ups and downs as they both try to work out what they want from life and from each other. Futaba eventually decides to pursue an agricultural university in Hokkaido, just as Taichi says he wants her to go to the same university as him. They're very much two tangents that meet at the wrong time and wrong place, neither really understanding the other and frequently feeling on edge or unsure around each other. We see little physical affection from them or any of the characters, as it tends to focus more on the emotional aspect of relationships. Futaba and Taichi also have to balance their friendship with Toma, and the three often function as a single unit, before drifting apart a little as Toma focuses on his baseball friends and the couple focuses on each other. Toma, as I'm sure you can guess, isn't exactly free of worries. He's had a crush on Taichi since they were kids, and has been living with the fear and anxiety of being closeted, which bubbles to a heat when he decides he wants to run away from the expectations of his friends and family and live in another city, just working instead of going to a university. He feels like no one understands him, and feels pressured by the perfect ideal all his friends have of him. A dramatic injury where he saves Taichi from being hit by a car at the cost of a broken leg and the loss of his future baseball career is the ideal rationale for him to escape those responsibilities and be closer to Taichi. He selfishly asks Taichi to visit him daily in the hospital, and Taichi, spurred by guilt, complies. They get a chance to enjoy each other's company for the first time in a while, but after this is when Futaba and Taichi end up together, another thing that just doesn't quite work out for our triangle.
The side characters are just as compelling and nuanced as our main triangle. Matsumi Itachi is Futaba's childhood friend, and the first person to work out Toma is in love with Taichi, as she recognizes the way he interacts as a reflection of her own behavior around Futaba. She is headstrong but terrified of having too many people who care about her, and finds their expectations crushing. Her place in the ending of the manga is a little iffy, but we'll get to that later. Mami Yagihara is the prettiest girl in school and part of the model club. She wants to go to a technical uni to become a beautician, and unfortunately, every guy she's friends with falls for her. She sees men and women as equal prospects for friendship, but unfortunately, others don't feel the same way. When she tries to befriend Taichi, rumors get spread around that she's trying to take him away from Futaba, and hates how her appearance gets in the way of her relationships. She confesses to Toma, and he tells her that he's in love with someone else, making her the second person to learn the secret. This is overheard by Toma's friend and Mami's long-term serial confessor, Kensuke Masuo. He's outright disgusted by Toma being gay, and ends up physically fighting him over it. But it's presented as explainable, if unreasonable, when two of Mami's friends drag Taichi to meet Kensuke and Shingo after the fight to settle things. Shingo Nimura is the only friend Mami has had who sees her as a friend despite her gender. He's kind of an edgy dick, and plays devil's advocate during the confrontation about Toma being gay, in a way that I think is supposed to show a side to Kensuke's anger as opposed to being the author's opinion on gay people because it's, well, a little aggressive. We also get a lot of time with Seiya and Akiko Mita, Toma's brother and sister-in-law, who took care of Toma after their parents were killed in a car accident. I enjoy seeing atypical family structures, and I also liked that we see Akiko as initially just Toma's tutor who decided to help the grieving family before falling for Seiya. Both of them care heavily for Toma, but Seiya in particular inadvertently pushes Toma away in his efforts to try and keep him safe and happy in a standard, conventional way. He is never able to come out to them, but I felt it was heavily implied that Seiya knows Toma is gay. And we get this amazing scene with Akiko and Matsumi, which ends with the sweetest but also the most hilarious advice to a closeted lesbian, which is to listen to Lady Gaga. This manga does a fantastic job showing the complexities of emotion and how difficult it is for everyone to understand each other. Each person in this love triangle is so much more complex than they seem initially, and come across as very fleshed out and realistic. They're also 17 or 18 during the manga, and have appropriate levels of emotional intelligence, being dumbasses. There are misunderstandings and miscommunications, but I found it less painful than with other manga, because it felt less like an excuse to cause drama, and was instead just the plot.
Love triangles in most romance anime and manga tend to be more of a straight line. He likes her, but she likes this other guy, and this guy doesn't even like the first guy. To have a true love triangle, it's gotta be a little gay, and in this instance, it is. At the beginning of the story, Futaba thinks she's in love with Toma. But what is love? And why does she feel different towards Taichi? Why does the idea of him being with other people hurt? Why is she comfortable around him, but nervous around Toma? So in that instance, she's facing one direction on the triangle, then turns to face the other way. Toma is quite straightforward, but interesting in particular because of the setting. He's a big guy, he's popular, sporty, and gets good grades in school. Girls are always fawning over him, but he never seems to reciprocate their affection. Well, because he's gay. He's in love with Taichi, but has no way of expressing his feelings. He only sees Futaba as a friend, but also likes that Taichi is with her because he seems happier with her than he ever was with him. We find out later that this is because of Taichi's inferiority complex, but to Toma, his friend just wasn't happy near him, and made new friends. When Toma is outed by gossip after a fight with Kensuke and Shingo, both Futaba and Taichi are conflicted, which isn't helped by Toma pushing them away, but it is understandable that he thinks they'd hate him. His position in the love triangle is its main driving force, as he cannot bring himself to reciprocate Futaba's feelings or confess to Taichi until late on in the manga. So why is he so far in the closet, is a question that you might be thinking. Well, it's not quite as easy to be gay in Japan as it is in the UK, for example. While there are no explicit laws that prohibit same-sex relationships, there is a strong social stigma, and gay marriage is still down to local authorities to allow, and most don't. A lot of gay men in Japan will never let anyone know, so as to not shame their family, and may marry out of obligation to have a family of their own. This can be the same for lesbians, and is especially muddied by the societal belief that relationships are a political decision to give your parents grandchildren. It's this that also causes a lot of the acceptance of cheating in Japan. Easier to be okay with your partner fucking around when you don't love them, and it gives you time to yourself.
There's a lot of interesting details around the way the characters react to finding out about his sexuality. All his friends are shocked but ultimately accept him in their own ways. The teachers never tell the family, even though the whole school finds out. It's unlikely that they wouldn't have heard the gossip, but chose to keep it private from the family out of a sense of shame. Now, let's talk about Taichi. He's caring and unsure about his direction in life. Posting along, just being bitter about not being cool and popular. He's caring, just a little slow to understand other people's feelings. Many characters give him advice, but it's only at the end of the manga he's able to put it all together in a way that he understands. Part of this is his sexuality. We see him unable to completely reject the possibility that he feels the same way about Toma. Taichi is the bisexual character that makes the love triangle an actual triangle. It just takes him the whole manga to work it out. I think it's genuinely sweet that he seriously considers both people in love with him. We'll talk about how the triangle resolves itself in a bit, so let's discuss the themes and problems our characters struggle with.
The main thing that Blue Flag gets right is how much it sucks to be a teenager. Everything is new and terrifying, but you're expected to know what you want to do and decide on the rest of your life when you don't even know what most of the world is like. Your head is full of emotions you can't give a name to, and everyone around you is just as unsure in themselves, but you can't read minds, so they seem so much more put together than you. Any decision is life or death, and the smallest mistake might destroy your social life. In a 2018 interview, the author of Blue Flag, Kaito, talks about how he wants to draw manga with an emphasis on just expressions that the reader can infer instead of relying on text. And this can be seen a lot in the later half of Blue Flag. Agony, disappointment, and love are shown in detail that really makes them hit harder after a few chapters of more stylized art. I particularly noticed this with Futaba, who is often drawn as a little creature, right up until some impactful moment where we see her as the teenage girl she is. The characters all struggle with maintaining their relationships while remaining themselves, as being a teenager is both an age of rebellion, yet paradoxically the most crushing era of your life, where being ostracized is tantamount to death. After the gossip goes around, most of the school turns on Taichi for rejecting Toma, and students even proclaim Futaba should break up with him so the two guys can get together. They take Toma's side because he's the more popular one, and there's little Taichi can do but try to ignore the weird questions his classmates feel bold enough to ask him. I cried a lot while reading this manga. I cry a lot while reading manga in general, but towards the end it was almost every chapter. I saw a lot of myself represented here. The fear, the uneasiness, and the confusion. Having to sacrifice parts of yourself so people won't reject you, and feeling that how others feel about you is just out of your control. It's just how big emotions feel at that age. It's a very good manga.
A big source of drama in the second half of the manga is now that Futaba and Taichi are together, they have to manage each other's expectations. This happens on a macro scale, with them choosing universities, but we also see a few instances of Taichi realizing he's expected to do something for Futaba, although she's asking for something indirectly. As far as we know, this is their first relationship. They're trying, but they also have no idea how this shit's supposed to work. Futaba is non-confrontational to a fault, hiding her fear and insecurities about Mami and later Toma's interest in Taichi, even though it tears her up. A lot of her character arc is learning to be assertive, often spurred on by Matsumi, who finds it frustrating that Futaba won't stand up for herself, which is ironic considering she is hyper aware of other people's expectations and tries to hide parts of herself to live up to often imagined expectations. A small thing Blue Flag does that I like is show that relationships require effort. The two don't just walk home after school, they have to hang around and wait for each other, or outright ask if they want to. Very few actions happen without some sort of prior communication. It's often only a panel or so, but it's a touch of realism that really helps sell it as an early relationship, with little routine built up. Taichi is trying to work out who he is and what he wants, and having a girlfriend makes that harder and easier. He knows that he wants to have a future with Futaba, but he can't really see what he'll be doing while he does that. He's excited they could go to the same university, but apprehensive that if they don't, the relationship will fall apart. The university she ultimately chooses is 12 hours away from his choice, and that's a lot to put on a relationship, but through conversations with other characters, they both decide that putting their future careers first is probably smarter than choosing their first love. As grim an idea as that might be, it's rare for childhood sweethearts to work out. We are so rarely still the same people, even a few years in the future. And as teens with little experience in life, every decision is made to the best of our abilities, and with no idea if it will work out or not. Career is the right choice for Taichi and Futaba, and freedom is the right choice for Toma, as living a life unburdened by fear and anxiety is worth more than doing what is expected of him by his family and teachers, even if a different choice would have been better in 10 years. It is now. Mami's
character mostly revolves around her discomfort with how other people treat her for her gender. It spills out onto other characters reflecting on their own interaction with sexuality and gender. Her introduction is very much a red herring. We initially see her eyeing up Taichi in a villainesque reveal, and if we take the art as his point of view, he's very much aware she's attractive. We later see he doesn't have any desire to be with her, because he's with Futaba. He's a good boy. But it's definitely supposed to put the audience on the same level as the classmates who see her as a homewrecker. Even Toma tries to dissuade her from hanging out with Taichi. She's a threat to the fragile third wheeling he's got going on after all. Even Shingo, the childhood friend who has shown her the most neutral friendship, tries to call her out on it. Mami is reasonably pissed off because she cannot have a male friend without everyone turning against her. She's very socially aware, but chooses to ignore this because she thinks it's stupid. Unfortunately, the world doesn't prescribe to her ideals, and she causes a lot of issues just by existing. Kensuke regularly breaks up with his girlfriends to confess to her, and it very reasonably pisses her off that she's used as an excuse to ruin someone else's relationship. Her frustration goes so far as to declare she wishes she was a boy, so she could be friends with other boys without issue. But she clarifies she does like being a girl and is comfortable in her body. It's mainly a desire to escape social pressures. Kensuke is almost her complete opposite. He views women as different but inherently special with value regardless of anything except if they're women. Very much an all women are queens sort of guy. And it isn't just for show. He says he thinks his ex-girlfriend Tomoe was pretty and he likes her, but he still breaks up with her for Mami. Tomoe is one of the few unconventional looking female characters in the manga. but Kensuke just likes Mami more. He even brings up a few reasons that very well validate his views. With women, there are behaviors that will come across as predatory or might hurt them. It's a sexist view, but his apprehension is very much understandable. A guy pushing a girl will be very differently viewed than two people of the same gender pushing each other. Similarly, him hugging or touching a girl will be received very differently than doing it with his bros. He can also only see men as bros, and finds it hard to console Toma's sexuality with this idea, because as women see men as a threat, he sees gay men as a threat, and even calls some of the girls out on this contradiction. Taichi is pulled into this debate, and is interestingly shown as being apprehensive about touching the two girls he's sitting on the bed with, which validates Kensuke's point of view. However, Taichi isn't exactly physically comfortable with men or women throughout the manga, possibly because of his unresolved bisexuality, but I call that a bit of a stretch. His isolation and inferiority complex is equally a reason for it. When pushed further, we also see Kensuke does have negative experience that form his opinion, confessing that he was molested by several men in his life. The manga presents his fear as reasonable, but not him taking it out on Toma as being acceptable. It's pretty well handled. He also ultimately remains friends with Toma, even though he's clearly still a little uncomfortable. Choosing to try and push past those experiences and prejudice is really all you can ask as a first step. As a bisexual who went to an all-girls school, I definitely understand the apprehension that arises from the intersection of gender and sexuality. The lines between friendship and affection can be blurry. I was never that open about my sexuality, but my friends knew. I also experienced the classic, "Oh, are you attracted to me?" when I came out, but it was never mean, more an, "Oh fuck, is this about to be a confession?" I did feel I had to be careful around female friends just in case it was taken the wrong way. And as I grew older and had male friends, I found it was similar. It was even more confusing as a girl because other women would be very affectionate towards me in platonic relationships. Unfortunately, that confusion doesn't stop once you're no longer a teenager. The idea of do I love you as a friend or something more is unfortunately something you have to untangle on a case-by-case basis. This manga was way more relatable than I expected, hence the aforementioned crying.
The ending few chapters seem to be quite controversial. Ignoring the homophobic people who were under some illusion that this was a super straight romance despite Toma's outright attraction to Taichi, the ending seems jarring and sudden with no warning, except that's kind of the point. The main story concludes in chapter 53 with an incredibly touching scene by the beach. The page goes white and it simply reads, "2 years later, I broke up with Futaba." Taichi himself even says this isn't interesting because sometimes relationships just end. They both decided that happiness was elsewhere than with each other, and is presented as very natural and understandable. He was sad, of course, and they didn't stay friends even though they wanted to. But Toma did, and 4 years later they were able to meet up and talk about it. Very mature and realistic, even if we don't know exactly what Taichi felt he needed to come to terms with. And the final chapter then follows the events of Futaba's wedding, 7 years after the main story, to another man. This final chapter is so incredibly mature in its execution and delivery of all the themes. No, not every character's plot gets resolved in a perfect bow, and no, not all the characters stayed friends. It's so human. I think a lot of people forget that just like a lot can happen on the page, a lot can happen off it. Humans are complex and multifaceted. The manga just reflects that.
But it sucks that they didn't get that happy ending, right? Well, they did. It's just that Taichi and Futaba went right for each other in the end. It's pretty well foreshadowed that they'd break up if you were paying attention, as is Taichi's sexuality. Throughout the manga, we get to see mostly through the eyes of Taichi, right? Well, look at these panels. You can't tell me that's not attraction. Teenage love is fueled by physical changes and rampant hormones. The end of school and going to university is especially rough on teenage romance. Going your own way, experiencing a brand new life away from the one you once knew, and learning what you want out of life, or more likely what you don't, so you can do something else. If you want a more mathematical answer, less than 2% of secondary school relationships last to marriage. So when I say the ending feels realistic, I've got maths to back me up. Taichi ending up with Toma is just a perfect ending. They found themselves. They even get married. It's a fun reveal as the whole final chapter is through the 25-year-old Toma's perspective. And besides the hilarious exaggerated angles of the 6'2" giant's view, the characters all seem equally mature in his eyes. We also get a fun few pages showing where everyone ended up, so it's not wholly unresolved. This is just where they are in life today. Mami is a beautician. Futaba is married to her new husband. Akiko and Seiya have 3 kids and seem happy. Some friends are just salarymen. Others have pursued artistic careers. This one guy's a streamer. Oh, and Masumi is married to a man. The ending is pretty perfect. But for both of us, her ending is a little confusing. There's not much in her character from the manga so far that implies she's bisexual, with most things firmly pointing to her being a lesbian. She even outright asks Taichi how it feels to be attracted to the opposite sex. Her husband says he's nervous about her being around men and women because it makes him jealous, which plays into the ideas of friendship across sexuality and gender, but it's very out of left field with what we've been given so far. I could imagine reasons. Maybe at uni she was able to explore her sexuality more. Maybe she was hyper-focused on her same-sex attraction to Futaba to notice attraction to men. Toma also agrees with his jealousy here, which would imply Taichi is definitely bisexual. Regardless of the confusion here, there's a very sweet attempt to dispel that sort of bisexual jealousy. Her husband is happy that of everyone, of every gender, she chose him. And hey, maybe this is supposed to play into the idea that we don't truly know the people we went to secondary school with, and in those gaps people live entire lives we never get to know about.
So that was Blue Flag. Even with how much we've gone into it, I would still recommend giving it a read because there's so many more things we wanted to talk about. Feel free to pick our brains in the comments. Also check out Kameno's channel. He addresses a lot of the ideas around bisexuality in manga we wanted to touch on, but there was no way we'd get this video out in time, and he does a really good job. If you've read Blue Flag, what do you think of it? Did it make you cry as well? Feel free to like and subscribe as full-time unpaid YouTubers. It would mean a lot if we could get to 500 subscribers.
Bye.
Bye.